Hey, welcome back to part 2 of our 9-patch series. This is going to be a little less than traditional today, and I know what you're thinking. There's a checkerboard up on the wall again. What kind of bait and switch is this? Well, you'll see. Let's get started. Hey, don't turn the channel. It's not a bait and switch. It looks like a checkerboard, kind of like the last one we did, but this is quilting. So we grow, we build. We are learning from the steps we learned in our last video on the 9-patch. So welcome back, everybody. I'm so blessed you are here. If it's your first time, I am Rob Appell from Michael Miller Fabrics. Welcome to Making It Fun. This channel is all about supporting your local favorite quilt shop, your online retailers, and all of the fantastic Michael Miller products they carry. So we're always using the basics here and we're having a blast. If you didn't catch the first portion of the version of the video, what I'm trying to say is I did a very traditional, very basic 9-patch, either using squares or strip piecing, and so you can enjoy that video. Some of the strip piecing methods you're going to want to know if you don't already, because I'm just going to jump right in as if you do, because we're going to keep using those methods for today. Now, in the last video, I promised a completely new approach to the 9-patch project. And like I said, you look on the wall and it looks very similar. We were talking about that checkerboard effect. But not only am I using the wonderful Hash Dot and the Fairy Frost and the Cotton Couture, these colors were chosen specifically to match into our beautiful ombre fabrics. This is the ombre border from the Quintessentials line. And let me just open it all the way up so what you can see that is so cool, whoops, so cool on this fabric is that the color variegates, and you can see like 4 to 5 major tones in there from edge to edge. And then we've also put in these wonderful little gold and black triangles, or pink triangles, I should say tonal triangles, so that you know which direction the fabric's running. Isn't that wonderful? And it works great if you look at the example even closer on the wall. All of the arrows are running in the same way. This is half of what we started before you tuned in today. So I was doing strip piece. This portion is exactly the same, and if you're brand new to this video, these are 3.5 inch by the length of the fabric, the 45 of the fabric. And on the ombre border, you can see it goes very specifically from a dark selvage all the way to a light selvage. One of the concepts in making 9-patch quilt blocks is you're after contrast. You want to make sure you can see each individual square within the quilt. So I'm wanting you to use like complementary colors, like an orange and a blue. I'm wanting you to use high contrast, valued shades that are very different. If you're doing scrappy, you want to make sure that you really get that gradient or that color effect from your 9 patches. You're making everything the same size, so it's very easy to reassemble regardless of what colors you're using. That's kind of where we left off as well. So these strip sets were made exactly the way that the strip sets were made before I made these into these squares, but I did make 2 as a reminder. You always need kind of an opposites or a counter effect going on. So what you are seeing is the remnants, the other sides of what is on the wall. And so I had 2 blue strips, 1 pink, I'll call it, 2 pink, 1 blue. So if you're following along for the calculations, if you're already halfway out the door to your quilt shop, 3 strips at least, 3.5 inches. So I basically was using half yards, excuse me. And when I'm all done, I'm able to get like 8 blocks from each combo set. So we can just build and build and build and have fun. Once the strips were made, of course, all I did was I rotated my fabrics, and I've already been cutting down. You can see this is that nice clean edge from already using the rotary cutter. What's going to be key here, if you want a gradient 9-patch like we're working on now, I want you to make sure you keep all of your strips in play, and we're not going to fast forward this part of the video. I'm going to show you how I did this. And what I did is I cut basically each strip and I kept it in color order, constantly coming back to that 3.5 inch mark along the edge and both of these perpendicular marks, making sure I'm making a really nice cut. And then I'm stacking these pieces, as you can see there, one on top of the next, on top of the next. And we're going to need to do that for both of our strip sets. I'm even keeping the arrows heading in the same direction because I'm going to keep them heading in the same direction in the blocks. That was an intentional choice I made early on. and it's really fun to work with these. And I don't believe I actually said it when I was showing you how I made the strips. I'm hoping it was obvious. One of the colors was light against the dark end. So the light pink against the dark blues. And because the fabric runs from dark to light, you just railroad or rotate one of the colors. So that's what I was also doing to maximize the contrast within our strips. Was I was going, instead of dark against dark, I was going dark against light as well. Small dog bed I'm building down there with my scraps. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing. So this is color grouping 1. I'm on color grouping 2 now. And as I find that same 3.5 inch mark along the side, and I'm double checking everything nice and square, now as I cut these, I'm going to build a new stack. And just stay nice and organized. This will make our color sorting very easy. And our last cut here. Let's not get so far ahead of ourselves they don't turn out nice. Okay, so stacking again in order all the way across our variegated strips from the quintessential ombre border. Mouthful. Now, what we're going to do, I just need to check up on the design wall because this is physically the last square I was using. So it had two of the blue edges were here. So that means as my countdown, I need this strip next, okay? So the last red strip was here, it came off of here, then it went blue. So now I'm gonna come down here and I'm gonna make a square that is 2 reds in order, and the blue, just remember, pulling from the light sides of our stack, okay? So this comes in here like this. This is the middle square. This is the fold off the bolt. So you can see right now, some of these triangles are going to switch directions and stuff. It's going to be fun that way. So in the center, you'll have a little bit of traffic of triangles, but the rest will all be heading one direction or the other. So this block is built, and I'm going to set it down here, and I'm going to keep it very organized. Now I used 2 from the red pile, so this time I'll use 2 from the blue pile, keeping them in order. So I'm just going to slide them down this way, and then I'm bringing in the corresponding red from the red pile, and you can see how the variegation runs right through, because that strip you could see would have been right in there, right? Isn't that cool? Okay, so with that being said, then this becomes the second square, and those were the blues, so that I have the 2 more reds, the 1 more blue, and the last one here. So with half of the strips left, I have 4 new squares on the table. I have 4 up on the wall, so that's the 8 I was just talking about from the 2 strips. Technically a ½ yard of each of the colors. Very easy. And now we're just going to sew these together and put them into this grouping. And that is one other variable for making what we're going to call the variegated 9 patch. So technically this would be a wonderful 2-color project, 2-fabric project, but it would not read as the same 2 colors all the way throughout the quilt. Now what you choose to do with the layout, whether all of the colors wash from one side to the other, or maybe they're going to wash from back and forth, maybe you're going to make double the amounts of everything and go up and down. Michael Miller has 8 different colors of the ombre that all work nicely together, so you could actually use all of the colors and make a beautiful rainbow 9 patch with the variegated. So it's very much like the first quilt in the first video. It is a solid checkerboard, 2 colors, easy, done. But with the variegated fabrics, it really adds some interest and impact. Now for this one, I don't think I would add in the sashing squares on it because I really like the way the color just floats, just, you know, glows throughout the fabrics. But again, that would be your choice, and you can use your magic design wall at home, like I use mine, to find if you want to audition in those sashings as well. If I was using sashings in a project like this, I would go super high contrast to really let the variation, the gradient of the fabric show up, like a white or a black. And I know black's my favorite color, but you can see, and this is why I have the black ironing board, what that does to ignite the energy in the fabrics themselves. So we have other things to cover in today's video. I won't even take the time to stitch these together. If you need to know how to put these squares together, please check the last video on sewing together the columns in the 9 patch. It'll be very easy. It's all part of that basics 9 patch video. But this was one of the things I wanted to share with you as a really cool, creative, mental muscle builder on what we can do just working with what we already know and just changing up the fabrics a little bit. I do need to keep these organized, so excuse me a moment while I really gently slide them up and out of the way, move all of this over here because I will sew them back together, but I just want to show you the next thing that I think is super cool. So I also have it hiding under the table. I'll be right back. That's right. We do have a other fun way, and I mentioned a little dynamite portion of this video. And so what I'm going to show you now is what is referred to as the exploding 9 patch. Something I want to point out. This is amazing. Basically, this is great. I love this. I did not come up with this technique, of course, but it's super cool. Now, it's part of the reason I didn't want to sew the blocks together in the last video because I want to do more of these blocks with the traditional blocks, and it's a very easy way. I will point out we are starting with our traditional blocks, as you see, standard checkerboard 9 patch. We're going to now add some character and creativity to them, but it's going to change the size. So if that affects your calculations, just be aware of that now. I'm going to walk you through it over and over again because it's a mind blow if you haven't seen this before. It's really cool. So imagine this is a 9 patch. It probably looks like a 9 patch from where you're seated. However, if I were to come through here and cut this a couple of more ways and divide it, it really changes it into a whole new block. Let's start at the basics. This is what we do. We start at the basics and we build up. Look at this little block. It's really a nice little block as a unit. And if you were just going for these units, it would have still probably been faster to make this unit this way. I'll show you in a minute. Instead of making all of these little teeny parts and pieces. Man, if I had to put like a little 1.5 inch square in there or 2 inch square, it would have not been so square when I was done with it. So by being able to build a big block like this, and then chop it up again, adds to the efficiency and accuracy that some patchworkers are really after. So, what did I do here? You can see it's been cut, but let me talk about how it was cut. Now, I'm going to bring another one into play. I'm going to grab a rotary cutter, or should say sharp rotary cutter and ruler, because good sharp cutters really make a difference. Now, what you need to do is you need to measure your block. I know that if I lay this bad boy on there, I am at 9.5 inches because I built the math of this, almost specifically. 9.5 inches, I need to find where my dead center point is. So one way is to divide 9.5 in half. So half of 9 is 4.5. Half of a half is a quarter. So that's 4 3/4 that I would then need to measure from one edge over. Very easy to do. Let's try it. So I said it was going to be 4 3/4. Even with the ruler upside down, I can still do that. And when I am doing it, I'm looking at the line as it runs through the block, on the edges, on the seam allowances running perpendicular. All of that is coming into play because it's going to help me make a nice square clean cut. We'll make 2 cuts, and I do not want you to move any of your fabric until the finish of the second cut. As I started to do that math, I thought to myself, it's going to be really hard to keep 4 3/4 straight on my ruler and in my head if I cut through all of these blocks to make these into exploding 9 patch blocks. So the other thing you can do is you can actually, on this particular kind of block, is I happen to know, remember, our strips were 3.5 to start with. If you're brand new to quilting, you lose a 1/4 inch on both sides. So my 3.5 is now 3. Way easier to divide 3 in half than 9.5 in half. Half of 3 is 1.5. remember, we're shooting for center. Let me make sure I'm ready to rock. I'm going to find this center line. Again, part of the reason accuracy was important to me earlier when building the blocks. Now I'm just going to find a 1.5 inch mark, and I'm using only this seam. I don't care about this edge at all anymore because I'm going to cut 1.5 inches. So let me just make sure, because I don't get a second chance at this, right? You want to make sure you're focused. So now I'm going to come in here, I'm looking at it, looks terrific, and I'm going to cut my first 1.5 inch cut off of this edge, and I am not moving this fabric to make sure the cut went through, hence the sharp blade. Now I'm going to rotate this down here, so now I'm pulling 1.5 off of this center seam line here. I'm trying to make sure all 3 squares are lined up this way. I'm going to rotate my body so I have a nice right-handed cut, even though my sewing machine's in my way. And I'm going to slide through here now, and that is all done, just like the other block. And now you can see how I just got 4 blocks out of the 1 block that was a 9 patch, and now these are super unique. Couple things I really want to drive home with any kind of exploding or disappearing block. It's best if all 4 units are the exact same size and they are squares, because squares can be rotated any different direction to make all kinds of neat stuff. If these happen to be rectangles, you're going to be limited to swapping corners, things like that, but you won't be able to be as creative as we could. So let's start it back at the beginning. Boom! Here we are with our 9 patch. Dynamite, it explodes. From here, let's take a couple of quick and easy rotations. I'm going to take one corner, rotate it 180 degrees, take the other quarter, rotate it 180 degrees, and if I were to stitch this back together, it looks kind of like a card trick block, doesn't it? Pretty cool. It's super interesting if you ask me. I've got these medium squares, this big chunk of color. I've got these tiny little small squares. And now you could take something like this and put it on the magic design wall and see what will happen, which is going to be really cool. So let me show you what that looks like. There you go. So you can see that really expands and pretty terrific. Okay. Now we come back to here and we can do all kinds of different things. If you really wanted to, you could have rotated all 4 blocks. However, now we just have a square with a frame, and that might have been easier to make another way. You could rotate everything a quarter turn. Do be careful. You know what can happen when we do with any of these blocks. But we can play, we can do all kinds of fun things in here. I mean, just really creative, really clever. So that now is basically just taking the block and making a very symmetrical quilt, which would look like a square with a sashing and a cornerstone. If you didn't pick up on that, when this translated over and over again, you can do lots and lots. Amazing. Okay, so let's do one more rotation for all of you. Let's put this back together in the center while you've got it there. Okay, and then what you might be able to do is take one of these here, and we're going to rotate the bottom corner down and this top corner up. So just a 1/4 rotation, 90-degree rotation. And now what we're going to get is these really neat, what looks like these sub strips that go together down the center. I'll take a quick photograph of this and throw it on the magic design wall. Here you go. Rad, right? Love it. Now, back onto the table, you can see that matching up these points in the center and these points as we sew together will help keep our blocks really precise if that's something that you're after. So a layout like this is really cool, and it would be much easier to make the 9 patch blocks with the strip set examples I showed you before and then chop them down this way. Super cool. But you know I never stop at easy, right? I like to keep going and going and going. My dear friend Susan always accuses me accurately of trying to do too much with every project. So here we go, Susan. This one's for you. Now, super cool project, but let's take something like this exploding block. Actually, let's use this one. I see that because we actually have, make sure I have a print solid as I go through. Again, I know all of the strips were the same size, so I can quickly come in here, find a 1.5 inch mark off of my ruler from the center line, slice it and dice it. And the reason I wanted to show you these If you didn't see the other video, again, please want to check this out. This was made from random leftover strips, and I did strip piece it and put them back together to make the 9-patch squares like we were doing, but those squares were made as more random squares to give kind of a different appearance in a very traditional layout. So the real reason I wanted to make those super wild blocks in the 9-patch is so we could get here with them. Because now that we're here with them, you can see how fun this would be if I were, again, to rotate here and rotate here. Some very interesting things going on. You don't have to leave them in the same position though. Maybe you would like to do something like this. So we can rotate and we can rotate again, and you can pick up on the turquoise line reading this way, the orange line reading this way. You're going to get these new random colors going in all different directions. The layout I showed you a moment ago with the strips with the little pebbles or the little squares lining up. Super, super cool. Very, very fun to work with. And this would go back onto your design wall, much like a scrappy project. You could go in and you could add sashings. And with this project, the last project I said, make sure your sashings are smaller than your square. So if these were 3.5s, I'd do like a 1.5 to 2. But now this block, you could either go narrow, narrow sashings or big, big sashings, which would make these blocks almost kind of float into them. You could put these blocks on point, which would change this whole project completely. Now, what's going to happen though, as we go to sew these together, let me just show you. So let's just stick with this layout. They're all wonderful, so it doesn't matter. I just can't wait to sew it together. I'm going to bring this down. I'm going to flop this over. I'm going to line up my seam allowances. I can't guarantee that the nesting is happening anymore because we were only able to do that by going to the dark sides earlier. Now we got what we got in front of us. This is real quilting now, kids. We're in the thick of it. Easy enough to chain piece, so I'm just going to grab this center seam right here. That was where I was looking. Sew this back together. I'm going to go ahead and just press to the rectangle in the middle seam. I'm hoping that will then give me a nesting combination. So I press from here to there. So when I get onto this seam, I will press into the rectangle again. Right? So from my small little square over to the rectangle, I will rotate it as it was going to fall back in so that those seams have now flip-flopped in that middle point. Marry those up. And that gives you a really nice little something to line up or match in the middle of the block. I love to use my seam allowances as my match points. Again, if you're trying to improve your accuracy, that's a tip I can offer today. And here we go. We're putting this last little bit in. Press this open. Let your water from your iron spit a little on there if it needs to because you're in the middle of filming. That's just what happens sometimes. Anyways, kiddos, there it is. Radical block. Let's take this, throw it on the design wall and have some fun. Looks pretty cool, doesn't it? Now, the only pitfall is when we made this block, we did lose probably 1/2 inch, right, on both sides. So it is no longer the same size as our traditional 9 patches were. If you wanted to make something that was very unique, more on that modern feel where everything is made from the same base of the 9 patch block, but you're using different sizes and different pieces, you could check out the video I did on how to assemble multiple blocks or fitting blocks back together. I used a log cabin as an example, but the technique would work for random 9 patchers as well. But this one, we could also very easily kind of go in working from center, and we can shave off 1/2 inch, technically, 1/4 from both sides. Is that what I'm missing here? Yeah. So boom, I would shave off a quarter all the way around the block, and this block would then come down to be this same size. It would read as a 9 patch. The outer blocks would be slightly smaller than the center blocks. So it would be kind of unique. It might be more of a challenge putting them back together, but if it's kind of this wonderful random explosion of color that you're using, and that's again why basics works so fantastic, and don't even get me started on what would happen if you quilted that. Oh my gosh, could you imagine the way the stitching would look on these fabrics that have just a little bit of something to say, but not much? They're like, hey, thread, why don't you say something about this, right? Like machine quilting. You can even just see it in the quilt behind me. It's incredible. So at any rate, super excited, super blessed. Hey, super wound up. It's Rob. That's how I do it. I am really happy you were here today, and I hope you've been able to pick up on a couple of fun things. What I want to do for the rest of this video now is I'm just going to do like I do sometimes on the Magic Design Wall, where we are using the Instagram Layouts app. I'm going to take a bunch of these squares, put them all back together in a bunch of different layouts, and let you see what kind of happens as we play. I'll even do one where I overlap some of these standard 9 patches in with some of our exploded 9 patches so you can get a feel for that too. I know you're loving the Magic Design Wall. I love hearing from you all in the comments below. As a matter of fact, we have tackled the log cabin block. It's another very traditional, very simple, very good starting place for us quilters. We've now tackled the 9 patch. I would love to hear from all of you. Is there another block out there that you're just maybe thinking there's something else we can do with it? Love to hear from you. Let me know in the comments below. Super glad you're here. Enjoy the Magic Design Wall, some of my buddies' music from Bootsy Marengo, and we will see you next time on another episode, Making It Fun. Wow, you are still there. Thanks for sticking with me till the end of the video. I know, I get a little long-winded sometimes. But if you did enjoy today's video, make sure you check out a few of the other ones we've created. I think they're terrific. And of course, please subscribe to the channel. Make sure you hit the little bell to be notified. I don't want you to miss a moment of the fun. Stay safe and happy sewing.